Precious Prodigy Peter Parker by concreteflour. Chapter 1. Too Smart for a School of Geniuses. "Cheating?" exclaimed a very confused Principal Moritor as he opened the door for one of his teachers. "Not exactly, and I thank you for taking the time to see me," said Brenda Williams, Midtown School for Science and Technology, resident chemistry instructor. Yes, but now I am confused," said the principal. "The note that Miss Gray said left on my desk said you were concerned about cheating students." "I am concerned about cheating, but not in that way. For the first time in my career, I believe I am cheating a student," replied the teacher. Still confused. "You know Peter Parker?" "Of course. A very good student with only slight disciplinary problems. Late for class, excessive absences, and more often than not asleep in class. I can't believe that he would be cheating," the principal said. "Let me explain," said Mrs. Williams. "In all the years I've taught here, the favourite thing I've known is to watch the light of understanding come on for one of my students, or to help someone who is having difficulty with chemistry to get it. There are enough difficult areas in our course, and remember it's an AP course, that at least everyone has something to work through. At least until I've met Mr. Parker. For lack of a better word, he's bored, like this course is beneath him. And it is. I don't know how, but it is. He is currently the top student in the class with 106%. "Even more confused," the principal said with a lift of his eyebrows. "If he is doing that good, how can you're cheating him? You should be proud of how well one of your students is doing." "Let me show you something," and Ms. Williams reached into the folder she had brought with her. "This is the test Peter took 2 weeks ago. As you can see, he scored 110%, everything perfect with 2 bonus questions." "But you've said he was the best student. Shouldn't he be doing well?" Mr. Moritor asked. "He should, but the problem is that while all his classmates took a test on what we had just covered, this test is for the material we will cover next semester. We haven't even started on this part of the program yet." "Why did you do that?" Moritor asked. "I wanted to see where he was at academically. I think you agree he shouldn't have gotten a perfect score on something he shouldn't have seen. If he would have struggled, I would have said the test got mixed in by mistake. But that's only the beginning." Ms. Williams paused. "Do I want to know?" asked the principal. A chuckle escaped from the chemistry teacher. "Well, I have bent the rules a bit, but only on behalf of my student. I gave another test yesterday." Ms. Williams pulled out another test. "Peter had a different test than everyone else. Actually, he took a test I had when I was well into my master's programme at NYU. There is no way he should have even understood what was on the page, yet alone be able to work out the needed processes. This wasn't just chemical equations and balancing formulas. This was identifying processes to develop compounds with catalysts and the many steps to formulate an end-state compound from other starting points." "Let me guess, he did well?" A sigh. "He did better than I did after 5 years of college. 2 of the processes he used I had to look up and check on. One is a part of what is probably going to be the Nobel winner this year. How would he even know that? The other is something I couldn't even find, but the basic reaction is sound, and the possibility of a shorter reaction process is intriguing. There is no way a sophomore can have that type of knowledge. He was even the first one done with the test. Hell, pardon me, but he could teach my class and I could learn from him. So if I say someone is cheating, it's me. There is no way I can effectively teach him anything, and I am just wasting his time. But I want to know how he could get to this level so young." "What are you recommending?" "We need to find out where he is academically and adjust his curriculum accordingly, or skip him a grade, or 2, or 7, whatever it takes. Even if he has a part of the ability he seems to, we are wasting his life here. What could he accomplish if he is given the tools to learn properly? What good could Peter Parker do if he had the ability?" "Where do you think he has gotten the knowledge?" asked the principal. I don't know. I've heard talk that he has an internship with Stark Industries, but others say he doesn't. But even if he did, how could he be getting this level of education off an internship? You're supposed to make coffee and copy papers, not develop new chemical processes. Principal Moritor rubbed a hand over his chin. I know he has some paperwork that says he has an internship, and yes, it's with SI, but it's in no way complete. It's something I should probably follow up on. Maybe he's spending all night reading textbooks. That could be why he sleeps in class. He's so reserved he probably has no sort of life outside of school, SI notwithstanding. He'd need access to a university-style lab to begin understanding the dynamics of chemical reactions he has described. He'd have to be working with experienced lab professionals to understand the process. I've seen him in the cafeteria, by himself or with the computer porn kid, something Leeds, I think. They don't appear to be socially active with their peers. I believe you're right. Peter is reserved. The only frequent interactions he has is with a very small group of friends, and some interactions with Flash Thompson. Those are problematic because it appears Thompson is bullying Parker, but several witnesses, including teachers, often put Parker as butting into a conversation Thompson is having with other underclassmen. It seems out of character for Parker, and it gives Thompson just enough rationale to avoid being labelled as starting something with Parker. It's not out of character for Thompson to be overtly aggressive, but it is out of character for Parker to step into the limelight. It seems I have the two of them in my office every other week or so. I think I need to investigate that also. Well, the chemistry teacher said, whatever we can do, we need to find out where Peter is academically and what we can do to move him along. I can't be the teacher that didn't help my student. Principal Moritor rubbed his chin again. Let me ask around the other teachers and see if they have any similar thoughts on Mr. Parker or if it is unique to chemistry. Then we can see where we will go from there. Sound okay? That sounds really good, Ms. Williams smiled in reply. Anything that will help solve the mystery of Peter Parker is okay with me. Chapter 2. Tony's Lab, with a guest. Ned and Peter were just coming out of Midtown School of Science and Technology on a Friday afternoon. MJ was already on the front steps. Hey, loser, MJ said. I think your ride is here, she finished while pointing out to the curb directly in front of the school. Both of the guys' heads swiveled in that direction. A black Audi with fully tinted windows was prominently displayed. But even more audacious was Tony Stark, in matching fully tinted sunglasses and black Armani suit, leaning up against the driver's door. The press of kids trying to exit the school stopped and gawked at the man before them. This was a school of science and technology. Tony Stark represented the pinnacle of most of their dreams in being able to bring science to life. Tony was the first to move. Hey, Pete, come on, we've got a big weekend planned. Ned put his hand on Peter's shoulder. Man, I would give anything for your life. Peter just smiled and hurried down the car. He hollered, See you later, Ned. Have a good weekend, MJ, as he sprinted down the steps. Almost before he got his door shut, the Audi was moving. Got a surprise for you today, kiddo, said Mr. Stark. Oh, Peter said excitedly. What is it? Now, if I told you that, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? Oh, come on, Mr. Stark, you can't do that. A teenager is really bad these days when they're surprised. Nope, this one is gonna be too good. After parking the Audi in the garage, Tony led Peter up to his private lab, just as Peter expected. What he didn't expect was for someone to be in the lab. Nobody was ever in Tony's lab, except for Tony, Peter, occasionally Rhodey, and when they were in trouble, Pepper. The man in a white lab coat turned around as the vacuum-sealed door whooshed open. Peter froze in his steps. OMG, you're Bruce Banner! Yes, sighed the man. You're the most renowned scientist of our age. Wow, I get to meet Bruce Banner. Tony laughed. Pete, I knew you were a fanboy, but try to breathe and not pass out, okay? But Tony, Dr. Banner is preeminent researcher for both nuclear physics and gamma radiation. Peter turned to face Dr. Banner. I've read all of your papers. I just have a million questions. Please, Dr. Banner. What followed was over 2 hours of relentless questioning by a high school sophomore to someone with 7 PhDs. Dr. Banner couldn't help but smile, as he rarely got to talk about his non-Hulk life anymore. Peter rapid-fired questions about biomedical conversion of the gamma particles, matter-energy conversion from the 180-pound Dr. Banner to the 400-pound Hulk, and what provided the energy. Did the Hulk have to supply the energy, or was it some form of matter-energy-matter conversion? Did Hulk absorb energy from around him? Did that provide power to further heighten his invulnerability? Since Hulk was able to speak English, there had been some transference of knowledge between the two. Was Dr. Banner able to measure the strength and depth of any link? Hey Pete, you know I'm right here, right? Tony said. You have never freaked out this much since you met me. But Mr. Stark, I get to work with you every week, but I'm getting to actually meet Dr. Banner for the first time. And for the record, I did fanboy out on you for the first time we met. You just didn't know it at the time. It was years before you think we met. I'm confused. We met when I tracked you down at your place in Queens, Tony said with a pinched, painful look. I first met you at the Stark Expo 9 years ago, the time the Hammer drones attacked. I was about to blast a drone when you showed up. Tony had his eyes pinched shut while he tried to remember. You wore an Iron Man mask. That was you? Yeah, you blasted a drone that had me targeted. Oh my God, Tony said. I can literally trace my first grey hair to that moment. You really are going to be the death of me. You know that, kiddo. Plus, I have fanboyed a lot since then. Just ask Aunt May. Nope. The less conversations I have with Aunt Hottie, the better. She scares me, Tony replied. Bruce chuckled. You're scared of his aunt? Brucey baby, she would scare even your other guy. Before too long, it was time for Peter to head home for the night. Happy was going to drive him home. Tony and Bruce went up for a cup of coffee and to unwind a bit. Bruce held his steaming cup and turned to Tony. Tony, just how smart is that kid? Genius, I'm pretty sure. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to test him. Hell, I don't even know of a test that could. There might not be, Bruce said, rubbing his chin. He was asking me questions I never would have considered at his age. Heck, I wouldn't have considered some of those in my graduate courses. Is gamma radiation or biomedical engineering his chosen field? You know what? I don't know. I was impressed with the kid at first because he made up the spider webs he developed for Spider-Man. I still haven't fully improved on those. But thinking about it, he has worked on Nat's widow bites, designed new arrowheads for Clint and helped me with my suit. I don't really know what his favourite is, and he's good at everything. I mean, that covers chemistry, electronics, engineering, metallurgy, plus what he works on in his own lab while I'm not there. The kid has his own lab? Bruce asked, incredulous. Yeah, for his own projects, and to keep him out of my lab when I'm not there. Bruce stared at Tony. I've always had to share with you. I've never gotten my own lab. The kid is here 3 days a week or more. You're here a few times a year sometimes. Do you have any idea what he works on when you're not here? Not really, but Friday keeps track of everything and wouldn't allow anything overly dangerous to go on. Right, Friday? Yes, boss. I am most diligent in observing the safety rules of the labs when Mr. Parker is here. See, Bruce, it's all good, Tony said with a grin. Bruce turned to look at the ceiling. Friday, do you have a list of the projects that Peter is working on? Banner, Friday replied. Peter currently has 138 projects in various stages of completion. Would you like to see a list? Even before they could reply, a list generated on a screen Friday made holographically. Automatically, both men started scrolling through the list. Look at this, that's DNA mapping and sequencing of genetic material, Bruce started. And this is different ways to combine vibranium. And this is definitely power conversion rates for some kind of storage device that I've never seen. Yeah, and this looks like at least 14 upgrades to the programming for Karen. Some really interesting updates, actually. Friday, have these been installed already? 9 of the Karen upgrades have been tested and installed, boss. Who's Karen? Bruce asked. Karen is an AI developed to help Spider-Man. He's a local enhanced vigilante that I've worked with a few times. Tony replied. It was Tony's turn to rub his chin. Any issues with performance, Friday? The actual performance of the integration of Spider-Man and Karen has reduced response time by 15% and compatibility by 25%. Karen is able to be more accurately predict requests from Spider-Man based on his prior situations and have choices available sometimes before Spider-Man can ask. Tony turned between Bruce and the ceiling. Why haven't you kept me informed, Friday? Sir, Friday replied, with a hint of remorse. I was instructed to monitor for unsafe practices and for projects that were inherently dangerous. None of Mr. Parker's projects are, by themselves, dangerous. His safety protocols are sufficient, and he provides pre-planning for eventual accidents, which occur fully 30% less than accidents do in the main lab, and he has worked well with Dummy to quickly resolve any accident. Dummy helps him too? Tony asked. Yes, sir. Your robots seem to be very anxious to help Mr. Parker when he is here. In particular, Dummy is extraordinarily observant and helpful with any project that Mr. Parker is working on. This the same Dummy that filled up the Porsche with liquid foam when I sparked the fuse box last week? Tony asked. Yes, sir. Bruce was openly laughing now. Tony, I think you have a little Tony working with you and you didn't even know it. How's it feel to be on the other side of all that brilliance? I think I need to find out just how smart the kid is. And quick. Chapter 3. Training Day. Spider-Man was twisting and turning through the air like his life depended on it. And in a way it did. Today's training session set Peter against 2 former assassins and the world's first super soldier. Spider-Man completed his flip and landed on the wall of the training room, 16 feet off the ground. As soon as his feet hit, he sprang in another direction as his spider senses detected danger approaching. Less than a second after he vacated that spot, an arrow let loose webbing just before it impacted the wall. No, complained Clint, aka Hawkeye, as yet another of his arrows missed the target. It's not fair, he shouldn't have seen that coming. Arrows are easy, said Peter. They're only going 350 feet a second. A machine gun takes real concentration. As he said this, he jumped to avoid Cap's shield, which clanged and rebounded off the wall. At the moment of rebound and still in transit to another wall, Spider-Man shot out a web that attached the shield, and he threw it at the ceiling, where another set of webs held it in place. Rolling backward and tucking his legs up into Cap's chest, he catapulted the super soldier in the direction the Black Widow was approaching him from, slowing her advance and giving Peter time to elevate a position out of her reach. Another arrow wasted itself against the training room wall just before the bow itself was covered in sticky webs, rendering it useless. The training had been going on for over 45 minutes. No one, as of yet, had gotten a serious shot at their opponent. None of the Avengers had slowed down Spider-Man, and other than some webbing, he hadn't hit them. That's it. That's all for now. Everyone relaxed, with Peter standing upside down from the ceiling. With a practiced flip, he let go, with his feet, and landed softly on the floor. But Peter, you're not giving your best shots back. That is minimising the positions you put yourself in, when you're in complete defensive mode. We've all watched you take down criminals, and you don't have any problem missing it up with them. Why aren't you with us? Well, Peter started. It's difficult. I'm spending so much energy in defence that if I were to slip even a little bit when I hit someone like Aunt Nat or Uncle Clint, I could seriously hurt them. You, Captain America, could probably shake off a good hit from me, but they aren't enhanced. What if I hurt them? That's why we need you to attack, Cap said. We need you to be able to focus on multiple things at once, not only your infernal spider sense, but the people you are fighting too. Think of it this way, you've got 8 bad guys lined up and you know number 4 is super strong. You need to be able to regulate your strength on all the rest, but still present yourself as a threat to the enhanced criminal. Does that make sense? Yes, it does, answered Peter. It'd be easier if it wasn't Aunt Nat and Uncle Clint. I don't want to hurt them by accident. Natasha spoke up. All the better reason to practice trying it. Captain America nodded his head. We need the practice, you know. We need to practice against every special power, so when we see something similar in the field, we can be ready. Which reminds me, Nat said. How feasible would it be for us to be able to learn to operate your webs? It would be a great advantage if we could use them to swing down from somewhere high, both for surprise or escape. Peter pulled off his mask and rubbed his face. I don't think that would help. Why not? It seems easy enough to do, asked the Black Widow. There's actually quite a lot that goes into it, but the simple answer is brute strength. At the bottom of a swing with a diameter of 100 feet, you have a load on your system of almost 4G, or 4 times your weight. For Clint, that would be 800 pounds of force and your hands and shoulders. Uncle Steve might be able to withstand the force, but it'd be difficult for anyone else. Plus, there are some other considerations. Like what? Asked Cap. Well, it is difficult, especially at the beginning, to know where to put your next web. You've all seen my early videos on YouTube and seen some of my less than glorious landings. I have found that maybe part of my spider sense, I have acute spatial awareness, knowing where the walls, signposts, ceilings are around me. That and 2 other things Mr. Stark helped me to find. The first is kinesthesia, a kind of awareness of movement between me and my surroundings. The second is proprioception, where I have the ability to know exactly where my hands, feet, or limbs are at any moment. Is that like your accursed spider sense? Clint said from behind Peter. It's not really fair. While still looking forward at Natasha and Steve, Peter flipped his wrist over and let loose a thwip. A well-placed web adhered itself over Clint's mouth before he could finish that statement. That explains your accuracy. I have wondered about that, Steve said. Peter nodded. For placing the webs, yes, but just as important as planning the next several. To avoid the bad landings. You'll need to utilise vector analysis to understand where you'll be with the next web you just started swinging on, and where the next one will take you. Each anchor point is only a quick route to the side of a building, or the ground if you don't plan ahead. Since I hardly ever swing in a straight line towards my objective, it's a series of left and right angles to get to where I need to go. One error in my computation and I go splat into the side of Macy's. And another YouTube video becomes famous. Natasha looked at the young man seriously. I know Tony has his suit to help him fly, but how can you do that while dodging Clint's, nice shot there by the way, arrows? Peter laughed. Lots of practice and way too many splats. Luckily, physics and math come pretty easy, so it's actually fun to figure out. This may sound funny, but it actually helps me relax. If you haven't noticed, most of the bad guys are bigger than me. Steve was shaking his head. Okay guys, let's head to the showers and get some dinner. Peter's eyes lit up at the thought of food, and he was the first one out the door. Clint walked over to them, finally able to get the webbing off his mouth. Most of it anyway. I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't want to fight him. That little squirt moves like nothing I've ever seen, and avoids everything I try to do. He held up his bow, still covered in thick webbing. How long before this stuff dissolves? Nat ignored him. The kid is right, darn it. I would love to be able to utilise his webs. Cap, you might be the only one of us that could. Even Tony in his suit isn't flexible enough. No, I couldn't either, said Steve. That kid gives Tony a run for pure smarts. I wouldn't even try to do extended swings like he does. In the middle of a battle, trying to figure the... what did he say? Vector analysis. Nope, my schooling was 75 years ago and it didn't get that far. We are going to find a way to get him more aggressive. I want to see him taking the offensive in these trainings. Clink groaned. I have a feeling that's gonna hurt. The three Avengers left the training room. Natasha stopped and pointed to the ceiling. Cap, aren't you forgetting something? Nah, when I see my webs dissolve off Clint's bow, I know I can come pick my shield off the floor. Chapter 4. A New Arm. A week after the training room session, Steve was leading Bucky down to the lab area. A very nervous Bucky followed behind, head swivelling as fast as he could. Are you sure this is safe? You know Stark doesn't want me down here. Steve nodded. It's okay, Tony's in Hong Kong. It's Peter that's going to work on your arm today. That squirt? Exclaimed Bucky. He's just Stark's intern, isn't he? He can't mess with the arm. It took Jury months to fine-tune this. Don't worry, Steve said. I believe you'll be in good hands. I think Peter is up there in the same league as Jury and Tony. Let's at least give him a chance, okay? Bucky reluctantly nodded, and they finished the short walk to the lab. Peter heard the door opened for them to enter. Thank you for coming, Sergeant Barnes. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do to improve your prosthesis. I have a lot of great ideas. I think it'll be really super when we're done. Of course, it didn't really sound like that, since it actually came across as, thank you for coming, Sergeant Barnes. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you can do to improve your prosthesis. I have got great ideas. I think it'll be really super when we're done. Bucky actually looked afraid, while Steve grinned. It didn't matter, though, because, with Steve's pushing, Bucky allowed himself to be placed in a chair next to the work table. Peter started by taking 100 measurements, length and circumferences, width of each band in individual segments, each while giving a running list of how impressed he was with Jury's work. By the time Peter got around to actually disconnecting the arm from Bucky's neural interface, the ex-Winter Soldier was internally laughing. The kid reminded him of the constant chatter a young Steve Rogers would spout when they were growing up. Definitely not on any subjects like comparative metallurgy or the plastic deformation versus brittle fracture of a metal. A little over an hour later, Bucky was all reassembled and he and Steve were headed upstairs. Does that kid ever shut up? Bucky asked. You're still upset about Berlin, Steve replied. Well, yeah, it's tough to find out a 12-year-old glued me to a wall, came Bucky's indignant reply. Well, I'm finding out there's more to that young kid than I thought. He might be as smart as Tony. Did you even listen to what he had planned for you? I kinda got lost shortly after he started. I haven't had the punk like that to listen to in a long time, since you were about 2 feet shorter. Well, said Steve. Tomorrow when we come back, you might just be in for a surprise. Peter spent the night in the lab. He had already complete diagnostics of at least this version of Bucky's arm, as well as some examples of other versions. He had several upgrades planned and already mapped out, just needing to make sure the neural interface would support the changes. He directed Friday to make the changes to the next version of Bucky's arm, as he worked his way through the process. The AI tirelessly followed Peter's commands late into the following morning, only stopping when the AI noted Peter's blood sugar starting to drop. It was time for more food. Peter finally got to bed at about 8 a.m. That afternoon, Steve again led Bucky down to the lab. This time Bucky wasn't quite as nervous. The open threat of Stark was somewhat lessened by the friendliness of Peter. Again, Bucky was put into the chair. Peter started a non-stop running dialogue of what he had improved. Bucky only caught about a third of it, and not enough to make sense of it all. Only 10 minutes after his arm came off, a new arm took its place. Bucky looked down at the lump where his other arm had been, the one that responded to his every whim. And nothing. I don't feel anything, Bucky said. Please, Sergeant Barnes, give it a minute. There are software upgrades as well as hardware. A reboot of the neural interface is required to link the processors in that right order. Bucky looked over to Steve. Did you catch any of that? Steve laughed. He said to let it warm up before you put it into gear. Why didn't he say that then? Because, Buck, smart people use bigger words and more of them. Look at Banner, Stark, and even your friend Jury. None of them say 2 words when 20 is possible. Peter was looking at a set of computer readouts from a cable plugged into Bucky's arm. Okay, the reboot is all complete. We can try it out now. And he unplugged the wire from the arm. Cautiously, Bucky started to raise his arm. His face had a look of doubt on it. It slowly faded as he put more and more range of motion on his arm. Hey kid, that's pretty good. It feels smoother than the last arm. Peter was watching him intently. That's great. Can I get you to put your arm in front of you, like in a blocking manoeuvre? Okay. And Bucky swung his arm in front of his body. Now try saying this. Deploy shield, Peter said. Okay. Deploy shield. As soon as the last syllable had been uttered, a 5-inch, slightly curved piece of vibranium slid out of both sides of Bucky's forearm. The effect tripled the size of the metal covering his chest, greatly increasing the protection the arm offered. Wow, that's neat. Try saying retract shield. Retract shield. And the shield slid back into place. Wow. That's not the best feature. Come over here, Peter said. Out of his pocket he took a dime and placed it on top of the lab table. Go ahead and pick that up. I can't. The vibranium fingers don't allow me to have that level of control. I have to use my real hand to do that. Just try for me, please. Bucky sighed and reached his new arm towards the top of the table. As his fingers made contact with the metal surface, his eyes got really big and he froze. Hey, I can feel that. Steve, I can feel the table. He continued his fingers along the table until they came to the dime and deftly picked it up between 2 fingers. I did it. I picked up a dime. I never thought that was possible. I can feel it between my fingertips. I can feel the serrated edges. This is impossible. Bucky turned to the young man, who was all smiles now. How'd you manage to do this? It's impossible. I overlaid a vibranium mesh with a rubber thermoplastic that contains a sensory net tied into your neural implant. It gives you at least the feeling in the fingertips without losing that much structural integrity. It may need to be replaced more often, but the advantages should outweigh the risks. I don't care about the risks. This is fantastic. I can feel again. I just picked up a dime. Steve, did you see that? I picked up a dime. Yes, Bucky, I saw you picked up the dime. Now I think it's time you picked up a check. I think you owe our inventor here a nice dinner. I think he's earned it. And he'll get it. This is much better than Stark or even Jury ever did. This is great. Dinner's on me. Let's go. They all left the lab and headed out to find something to eat. Steve, Bucky said contritely. I'm a little short. Would you be able to spot me some cash? Chapter 5. Stark Industries. As the bell rang, ending 5th period at Midtown School of Science and Technology, Principal Moritor was standing outside the door of the chemistry class. He smiled as the students walked out and, mostly, ignored their comments. Comments like, "Oh, Ms. Williams is in trouble," or "Who do you think he's after?" Moritor smiled. That is what the PA system was for. He didn't have to chase down a student. He had them come to him. He was, in fact, here to see the teacher. As the last student left, he entered the classroom and saw Ms. Williams straightening up the papers on her desk. She looked up as he came to her desk. "I have some news for you, Miss Williams. You were so perplexed by the apparent complexity of Mr. Parker's education and his internship. I have arranged for you and me to do a review of his duties with Stark Industries." "What do you mean? Actually going to Stark Industries, or just getting them to send us his duties?" asked Ms. Williams. "You and I have a meeting with the head of the intern department tomorrow at 9 a.m. "Don't take this the wrong way," said Ms. Williams, "but why are we both going?" "Well," answered the principal, I will be the most useful for the paperwork side of things, and you will be able to give a good representation for the science side of things. Oh, and you don't think I would want to miss out on seeing the inside of Stark Tower now, do you? Do you think we'll even get past the lobby? I've all kinds of stories about how tough the security is there, Ms. Williams asked. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. The head of the intern department contacted Pepper Potts, eventually. It had to go through 4 layers of underlings before it got to the CEO. It seems that a school was doing a review on Peter Parker's internship, and although the internship was noted in the SI files, it had no information at all about his duties. The head intern was of course familiar with Peter. Just about everyone in the research was by this point, but because he primarily worked with Tony Stark himself, there was very little in the files about what he was supposed to be doing. This was a problem, because the school was coming tomorrow to check up on the internship. Pepper returned a call to the head of interns. Mr. Sharp, you have some questions about Peter Parker? Yes, Miss Potts, even though we have worked with Peter in the labs, we don't have any written job description for him. In fact, most of his intern file is missing or not filled in correctly. We have a meeting with representatives from his school at 9 AM tomorrow. Okay, the paperwork we can figure out. I do have a question, however, about everyone working with Peter. It was my understanding that he only worked with Tony in the upper lab. Well, Mr. Shupp frowned. That used to be true. However, Tony is gone a lot and the lab directors discovered, almost by accident, how helpful Peter could be. So they have been utilising him every time Tony is out of the building and Peter is here. For what projects and how much time in aggregate? I'm afraid it includes projects all up and down the line. Peter has actually become a favourite. It seems the first time you tell him about a project, he listens intently. The second time, he asks great questions. And by the third time, he knows as much as the person working on the project. He's become a talisman of sorts for everyone. We actually say we've increased our efficiency over 25% because of his help. Why haven't you gone to Tony with your questions? Asked a very serious Pepper Potts. Mr. Shups shuffled his feet. Most of the interns are scared of Mr. Stark, and? Pepper repeated. Well, Mr. Stark is the absolute best in his field, but can be demeaning sometimes to those he feels are inferior. But Peter seems to go across several educational lines, from engineering to biology to physics, and he is recognised as one of the best chemists here, and we have a Nobel laureate on the staff. He said this with his head bowed, just in case the famous Pepper Potts' anger might reach out to take his head. She just nodded. I can see your point on Tony. Lord knows the trials I have had. But how could anyone, especially a high schooler, keep up with the SI staff? None of us know. It's the leading topic for lunchroom conversation. What is the next thing Peter will rock up with? Any more, he is not keeping up with us. We are trying to keep up with him. Pepper turned and looked up at the ceiling. Friday, would you please prepare all the paperwork for Peter's internship, with the caveat of working with Tony Stark, and as needed with other lab directors. Then messenger that over for May Parker and Peter to sign tonight, and have it messengered back here for Tony's. No, better yet, my signature. Right away, Miss Potts, came the reply. Also, prepare some rather extensive NDAs for tomorrow. I have a feeling the school people will be getting an eyeful. Pepper turned her attention back to Mr. Shupp. Would you please work with Friday and me to get a list of all the projects that Peter has worked on or is working on, including those with Tony and on his own? I will need that in the morning too. Mr. Shupp bobbed his head. I will get right on it. He started to turn away, then paused. You will need? Does that mean you will be meeting with the school officials? No, it means we will be meeting with the school officials. Let's meet at 8 AM to go over the paperwork. She looked back up to the ceiling. Friday, that means I need to have my schedule cleared for the morning. Right away, big boss lady, came the AI's reply. Mr. Shupp worked late into the night, but at 8 AM sharp he was in front of Miss Potts' office with a thick notebook of paper. She had on her desk all the signed documents needed for the internship, by both SI staff and May Parker. Pepper had actually had a quite good conversation about May the night before.
Pepper had never understood the weird dynamic between Tony and May. She always thought May was one of the nicest people on earth. But then again, she would have to be, to raise such a wonderful young man like Peter. At 8:45, Pepper had a good handle on all of Peter's activities. She figured the school would be here 2 to 3 hours, going over what should normally be 15 minutes worth of paperwork. The rest of the time would be trying to explain the extraordinary events around Peter. That meant, by noon, she should be done with step 1. She had Friday clear all of Tony's schedule for the afternoon and lock out the private labs for the day. Tony couldn't be aware of what was going on, and that was going to change right away. At 9 a.m. sharp, a smartly dressed Pepper Potts and a slightly bedraggled Mr. Shupp met the 2 school officials in the lobby of Stark Industries. After a quick security check, they were led to a conference room on the 2nd level. To say the 2 people from the school were confused was a huge understatement. They expected the low-level conference room, but never expected to even see someone as high up as Pepper Potts, let alone meet with her. Pepper started things off. "Thank you for coming down here today. I apologise that our paperwork in regard to Mr. Parker is not up to our usual level." She laid a thick pile of papers down and pushed them across the table. "You should find that everything in there is correct." The principal pulled the papers in and started to review them. Ms. Williams shyly raised her hand. Pepper smiled. "Please, you don't have to raise your hand here." Turning red, Ms. Williams spoke. "It wasn't only about the paperwork that we came here today." "Is there another problem?" "Yes," stammered the teacher. "Or, no, not really a problem. You see, I'm Peter's chemistry teacher. I've never had such an exceptional student who is so far advanced in any class. And it's not only in my class, in all of his science classes. Peter is destroying the curve. As teachers, we realise the outstanding student, but his level of comprehension is unheard of. He has to be getting his lessons somewhere else." "I see," Pepper said. She looked over to the head of the interns, and he slid 2 more packets of papers towards the school staff. "These are non-disclosure agreements. Before we go any farther, or show you any more, we must insist you sign these, for not only SI security, but for Peter's privacy." They both accepted the proffered pens and signed on the appropriate lines. When both forms were slid back to the head of the interns, Pepper took a deep breath and sat down opposite the 2 from Midtown. "In a way, I need to thank you. Your request started a chain of events that really opened our, or should I say my, eyes. Peter was brought on to work with Tony Stark. That was true. For some reason, the 2 of them clicked personality-wise, the old bachelor and the wisecracking teenager. Tony thought that Peter was a big secret, but it's hard to keep a secret like Peter, someone who is friendly, engaging and curious. It seems it took only once, when Tony was away, for some others to be corrupted into using Peter for their own projects. This was brought to my attention last night. I have still not been able to wrap my head around it all. You are invited to go with me this morning to visit these other projects and make sense of it all. Be aware some of the people involved, especially me, may not be very happy with all the results of our fact-finding tour. The question of how Peter is so far advanced academically is also a question for how he can help on such a wide range of topics. I want the same answer as you. So, if you want to proceed, let's get moving." Nothing on earth could have stopped the 2 school professionals from going. The first lab they stopped at was a chemistry lab, headed by Dr. Guthrie, another of the SI staff on a short list for Nobel. Pepper literally stormed into the lab. All work ceased as everyone stared dumbfounded at the CEO. Dr. Guthrie swept around the table in the centre of the room. "Miss Potts, it's an honour to have you down here. I don't think you've ever been to our lab before. How can I be of assistance?" Pepper reached her hand back and was rewarded by several sheets of paper thrust into her hand by the head of the interns. "You can be of assistance by telling me how you are using a high school intern in all these projects." She laid the papers down one at a time, more like a prosecutor would display the evidence in a trial. "You can attempt to justify to me the use of your time in teaching him, which must be quite a bit of time to get him up to speed on these projects. And for what end?" Dr. Guthrie took a step back. "Peter? This is about Peter?" Yes, this is about Peter. You know, as she glanced around the room, the only one that is not working on at least their master's degree or higher at the moment. Dr. Guthrie and everyone in the room visibly blanched at the tone of her voice. Well? She demanded. Dr. Guthrie found his voice. You don't understand. Then make me understand. We don't have to teach Peter, he comes up with it on his own. His first times down here he was a prototypical student, hands behind his back, unwilling to touch anything. The next week he showed up with a list of questions that took some of our staff research to answer. The next week he was answering questions from the students. Now, as often as not, we are changing our project slightly because of his ideas or suggestions. He is yet to be in error, and several of the ideas he has done would save several steps in the formulation process, thus saving time and money. Ms. Williams spoke up. I came across a reference for a sulfide salt bath to strip positive ions out of a solution. Is this an example of something you've worked with? Yes, exactly. That is one of the shortcuts that Peter came up with to eliminate a high ionic percentage in our samples. We had been stumped before his help with our purification process. Ms. Williams looked even more confused. He came to you with that? But where did he get it? A high schooler doesn't come up with these ideas. You don't understand, came the exasperated reply. Peter is the most intuitive intellect I've ever met. Yes, and that includes Tony Stark. He wants to understand everything. He is the fastest learner I have ever seen. But a high schooler, came the reply. Yes, a high schooler, came the indignant reply from Dr. Guthrie. Peter is a high schooler. Yes, he is young, but he is a genius, no matter the age. I cannot, do anything to restrict the flow of information to him. I have a moral obligation as a teacher myself that when I find someone of such ability, I have to do everything in my power to expand their horizons. I can do nothing less. The next 20 minutes were spent with the junior staff sharing stories of how Peter had helped them. A video of Peter participating in a brainstorming session and throwing out idea after idea, most of which were adapted. The group left the chemistry lab and proceeded to the lab for physics, electrical engineering, environmental engineering, and biology. In each case, they heard the same story, how Peter had been invaluable to the department. When they met again in the same conference room they started in earlier that morning, it was a sombre group of people. Pepper started. I'm so sorry this has gotten out of hand. Obviously, we do not have protections in place to safeguard the time that Peter spends here. The head of the intern spoke up for the first time today. We have never had anyone around here like Peter, except for maybe Tony Stark himself. In our competitive atmosphere, everyone wants every advantage they can get. Ms. Williams spoke next. Obviously, the work here challenges him more than our school could ever do. Obviously, said Principal Moritor. We are legally obligated to have Peter continue in school, but just as obvious is the lack of education we could provide him in any of the fields we have seen today. Looking at what is best for Mr. Parker is more than we can decide. His family needs to be involved. Pepper Potts nodded her head. That is something I can arrange. I'll be meeting with Tony later today, and I will arrange a meeting with his aunt for as soon as possible. I take it you would like to be there also? Moritor nodded. If only to help in the planning process, we may be able to provide some resources. Pepper stood up, showing the end of the meeting. Then I will arrange it. I will be talking to all of you soon. Thank you for coming in and making me aware of the situation. As the head intern led the Midtown people out, Pepper sat back down. A morning full of revelation swept over her. Finally, she glanced up to the ceiling. Friday, I hope you got all that. I want it condensed down and ready when I hit Tony over the head with it in a few minutes. Then she paused, and more to herself said, Dealing with one Tony Stark isn't enough. There must be another. A sigh. At least with Peter we have a chance to make a better version. Chapter 6. Pepper and Tony. Tony Stark was a man of impulse.
Some of his best ideas came when he was exhausted, trapped, wounded, or otherwise outside of what a normal person would call routine. Only a few people had ever seen this side of him, since he rarely let people get that close. Oh, he was famous for his dalliances, but most of those people never even woke up with Tony still in the same building, and sometimes he was in a different country by then. Only 3 people, well, now 4 with Peter, ever saw that side of Tony. They were Pepper, Rhodey, and Happy. Even Peter hadn't seen the terrible swings that Tony had gone through, mostly because of alcohol. He had cut way back once Peter had been around. Tony thought he was in a good place. No terrible news reporting on him or the Avengers. No disasters or calamities in the recent past. Lab time was both relaxing and productive, as Peter was actually becoming a resource to bounce ideas off of. Life was looking up. The door to the lab slammed open. "Tony, what the hell do you think you're doing?" yelled Pepper. Reattaching the subharmonic relay in my left gauntlet," answered Tony. "Not that," said an obviously exasperated Pepper. "I want to know what you're doing with Peter Parker." "Pete? What's wrong with Pete?" Pepper dropped several folders, each several inches thick, on Tony's lab table. "For your information, and known to almost everyone but you and I, Peter probably has more projects going on at SI right now than you do, in more areas of research with even more staff, and is probably involved in almost 70%, she enunciated that part very slowly, of the research going on in this building at this time." "You're kidding. He's my intern. He helps out in the lab with me. No one else even knows he's here." "Not even close." Pepper actually grimaced at Tony. "It seems that he's a local favourite. Your Nobel laureates compete for his services. There is hardly anyone in any lab other than this one that doesn't beg for him to come collaborate with them." Tony shook his head. "No, see, that's impossible. The kid only works here with me." "Friday, please display the graph of the hours Peter spends here in Tony's lab versus other parts of R&D. A holographic image in a pie chart, along with associated raw data, showed up in front of Tony and Pepper. The chart obviously showed a smaller slice of the pie was being allocated to Tony in his lab. Tony actually spluttered. No, that can't be right. Some of those dates I wasn't even here. Fry, how could Peter have been here if I wasn't here?" Friday responded. "Mr. Parker was given full access by you to all the labs, sir. When you are not here, and if he is following safety protocols, he is allowed to work on any project." Tony was rapidly shifting through the stacks of lab reports. No, this can't be right. There are projects all over the board. Electronics, engineering, chemistry, biochemistry, physics. No, the kid helps me out here with his suit, and sometimes with the Avengers gear. This can't be right." Tony was shaking his head. "Bruce and I found a bunch of projects that he's working on, but these are completely different from those. You're talking literally hundreds of different research projects. There's no way. I can't even keep up with every single project that everyone is working on, let alone contribute." "Oh, it is. I've talked to all of the lab directors involved. I've threatened most of them with firings. They have all taken advantage of a teenager. But to a person, they all admit that they would do it again. They have all learned how smart Peter is, and they would move heaven and earth to utilise his brain. I think you need to review his work, talk to the lab directors, and figure out just how smart Peter is. And you'd better do it quick. His school was in today, and that's how we found all this out. It seems your high school intern is regularly doing graduate and postgraduate level work over several disciplines. We are going to meet with them tomorrow to discuss Peter's future. I suggest you get up to speed." With that, Pepper turned and left, leaving the paperwork in front of a stunned Tony Stark. Tony stared at the quickly receding back of his on-again, off-again fiancée, and he stared at the pile of papers in front of him. Slowly, he slumped into a chair. "Fry, see if Bruce is available to come down here."
When Bruce entered the lab 15 minutes later, he saw no less than 50 large holographic screens up and running. A quick glance at what was on them gave no clue as to what project Tony needed his help with. Chemistry equations were on the first screen, and engineering the second. Others had references to projects Bruce knew were being developed downstairs. He turned to Tony, who was comparing notes on paper, something he never did, to the notes on the screens. "Hey, Tony, what's up?" "Bruce, thank God, I need your help," Tony said, exasperated. "With what project? It looks like you're working on dozens," Bruce replied. "With all of them. They're not my projects, they're Peter's projects. Or projects he's involved in, or collaborating with Nobel laureates or other PhDs. You know how we were talking the other day about how smart Peter is and how we should test him?" "Yeah, I remember. I'm starting to think there might not be a test hard enough to test him. Most of the stuff here in my field is great and advanced, but there are more fields here that I have to acknowledge are beyond me, and he's only in high school." "I can see that. These biochem equations are graduate-level derivations. You're saying this is all his work? How is this possible?" "It seems my lack of oversight was filled in by unscrupulous lab directors that were eager to tap his brain. Once they realised how smart he was, which the fact that I was so slow leaves me kicking myself figuratively, and Pepper is doing literally, they have been introducing him to all aspects of what SI is working on," Tony said with a sigh. "But he's a teenager in high school. How would they expect him to... No, that's too incredible." "Incredible, yes. Impossible, no. I've talked to one of the lab directors who told me the same thing that I already know. Everyone, and I mean everyone, loves Peter. He personally stated that Peter has saved them months in product development and probably millions of dollars in cost and time." "Okay, I can see that, but what do you need me for?" "Peter's school is coming tomorrow and I have to explain all this," Tony said with a sweeping gesture around the room. "I have to have a plan for his education and what we're going to do to help. Buddy, I need your help. I'm going beyond my comfort zone. We need to think of something." Tony settled back into the chair with a slightly wild look of utter desperation, yet with utter determination. The two scientists/friends/avengers got to work. 8 o'clock the next morning found Tony and Pepper inside the apartment of Peter and May Parker. Peter was, fortunately, at school at that time. They were there to explain the recent events and invite May to a meeting later that day with the school staff and other interested parties. May started out understanding that her nephew was smart and probably a genius. When Tony was trying to explain that Peter was probably just as smart as himself in engineering, and as smart as Bruce Banner in biochem, and smarter than a whole roomfuls of PhD graduates, May took on a look of incredulity. Pepper had to step in and say, yes, Peter was in fact working with distinguished doctors in several fields, and had impressed, even astounded them all. Pepper, who actually had better rapport with May, lay out the groundwork of what they wanted to do. At 4 p.m. that same day, Tony and Pepper once again welcomed Mrs. Williams and Principal Moriter into SI. This time, the conference room they were led to was fuller. Both schoolpeople were acquainted with May Parker, who was sitting at one end of the table. The introductions around the table was like a veritable who's who from the science world. Dr. Bruce Banner, Dr. Thomas Boyer from MIT, Dr. Stephen Tanksley from Harvard, and 4 more doctors from SI, all with names that were recognisable. The professors from MIT and Harvard showed how much clout the name Tony Stark carried. Everyone by this time had been made aware of the enormous volume of work that Peter had been performing, all of it well past a normal high school student. Bruce and Tony had previously laid out, along with the lab directors, exactly what Peter had been working on to the professors from the universities. This included video that Friday had collated of Peter collaborating with lab scientists. This covered a good part of the morning. The work itself was in normal enough cases to award an advanced degree in one or more fields. More than once in history, people have received degrees for advanced work in a field of study. The more that was described, the more interested everyone had gotten. This was almost humorously shown by the fact that MIT and Harvard were actually competing to see who would offer the best education package to Peter. May, and surprisingly Tony, were adamant that Peter finish his high school and be a normal kid for as long as possible. None of the people besides Pepper, Tony, Bruce and May were aware just exactly how unnormal Peter was. Starting immediately, with Peter's approval, would be a multi-pronged educational programme designed to catch up on anything skipped over in Peter's education and to accelerate his education in others. By the time Peter graduated high school, he would earn at least a bachelor's in engineering and chemistry from MIT and a bachelor's in business from Harvard. Everyone involved agreed to NDAs for the safety of a minor, as well as any potential danger if anyone found out everything that Peter was involved in. Mrs. Williams and Principal Moritor walked away from SI with a sense of awe. "It was only yesterday that we brought this to the attention of Pepper Potts," Mrs. Williams said as they shared a taxi back to Midtown. 24 hours in her hands or Tony Stark's is not the same as other people, I believe. Besides, did you see any rings under Tony's eyes? He couldn't have gotten any sleep and looked like that. Dr. Banner's eyes were just as ringed. Miss Potts looked fine, however," replied Principal Moritor. "Ha!" laughed Mrs. Williams. "There is a woman that could probably spend a week straight up working and still look like she came out of a spa." "So, do you feel better about your student now?" asked the principal. "Well, he's not really my student anymore. His class time will be filled with coursework from 2 universities instead of high school chemistry. But I feel better about him being challenged. If anything truly could challenge the boy. I just feel lucky to be able to see and know him before he changes the world, which I firmly believe he will."
Precious Prodigy Peter Parker by concreteflour. Chapter 7. Tony Talks to Peter. Peter had a pretty good day. Flash was absent from school, and that made the day great all by itself. He was able to make another batch of web fluid in chemistry class, and swinging around Queens after school was fantastic, which meant no major injuries and quite a bit less crime. As Peter entered SI for a night of brainstorming with the one and only Tony Stark, he was conscious, first of all, of the voices coming from the penthouse area. Enhanced hearing had its uses. He could detect more voices than normal, even with the Avengers there. He quickly changed out of his suit and into his street clothes. Slipping out of his room, he made his way toward the common area. There he saw several people he did not know, and many more that he did. Some of the Avengers were there, specifically Captain America and Bucky Barnes, Tony and Pepper, and, surprisingly, Aunt May. He recognised several lab directors from downstairs. Most surprising was his chemistry teacher and Principal Moritor. The last couple of people he had never seen before. As he stepped into the open, all conversation quickly stopped and everyone turned to face him. Peter's spider sense didn't go off, but the natural reaction caused him to come to a sudden stop. Tony was of course the first to recover. "Pete, my boy, we have to talk," Tony said with a big grin. "What is this, an intervention?" Peter asked. "Does this have anything to do with—" No, interrupted Tony. "We're here to talk about your school." "My school?" he said with a confused look on his face. Several of the people there were nodding their heads. Principal Moritor had a large silly grin. His aunt and Pepper were dabbing tears. "I don't understand," Peter said. "Well, that's a first," said Tony, which somehow elicited a laugh from everyone involved. Tony looked around at everyone in the room and back to Peter. "Kid, let's you and me go down to the lab. I think this may be easier without all the distraction." Tony walked over to Peter and, placing a hand on his shoulder, started guiding Peter out of the room. Tony chatted about small things, projects they were working on, the latest screw-up from Dummy, and how Tony wanted more lab time, like always. Tony guided Peter to one of the chairs and hopped up on one of the tables across from Peter. "Kid, I gotta tell you, this has been a crazy couple of days," started Tony. "Did I do something wrong? Am I in trouble?" questioned Pete. "Not at all, really," answered Tony. I guess I'm the one who has to apologise. I didn't realise how much you were doing around here, working with all the labs, helping out on way too many different projects. It came to a head the other day when your teacher noticed you were way too advanced. Tony actually smiled. Good teacher, that one. It takes someone special to notice the special in others. Anyway, that's got the ball rolling. Pepper put together all the projects you were working on downstairs. Bruce and I have looked at the projects you were working on upstairs. Nice work on Barnes's prosthetic, by the way. That mesh was very inventive. Tony paused and took a deep breath. Peter's eyes were the size of saucers, not sure what was coming. Tony continued, What I'm trying to say is you've blown everyone, including me, away. You're working on stuff that should be way past your education, but it isn't. You've shown an aptitude in so many areas of science, and so quickly, that no one, not the lab directors, your teachers, heck, even me, can keep up with you. Peter stammered. What's going to happen? They're not going to kick me out of school, are they? Quite the opposite. Do you remember that Star Trek show where Nedley or Wesley or someone got made an acting ensign with a heavy dose of study? Yes, that was Wesley Crusher on Next Generation. Of course it was. Well, you're about to get the same treatment. You've outgrown most of your classes. In those areas and others as we decide, you're going to get advanced training while still at Midtown. Since you have shown a complete inability to pay attention in those classes, you'll be reviewing material for your advanced classes during those times. You will take proctored tests at the same time the rest of the class takes their normal tests. Tony took another deep breath. Your work here, with a few exceptions like working in your suit and other Avengers gear, will be closely monitored, similar to the other interns, for class credit in whatever area it involves. You'll also be more involved, if that's possible, in the write-ups that go along with the completion of each project. But May won't let me take courses other than my normal school, Peter protested. Nope, your scary aunt has signed off on all of this, with her usual demands. This time I totally agreed with each and every one. Remember, I was sent off to school at 14. I know what the social isolation is like. If I didn't have Rhodey back then, well, I don't really want to think about that. Tony was shaking his head. You're going to be getting college credits for this. How many, we still aren't sure, but you could be way ahead of the curve. I'm proud of you. If Peter was surprised at anything that Tony had said, nothing surprised him as much as when Tony pulled him into a big hug. I don't have to go away, and May is okay with this? Peter asked. 100%, which, frankly, surprised the heck out of me. Just when I think I can figure her out, she throws me another curveball. But, Spider-Man, I'll be able to continue patrolling Queens, right? Yes, and your aunt agreed to that too. She knows how much it means to you. Once again, she has surprised me, but not to the degree that I think she loves you. She, and the rest of us, would do anything for you. You know that, don't you, Pete? Tony said, with more than a hint of emotion in his voice. Now, before this gets any more maudlin, let's go upstairs. I'm sure by now the Chinese and Thai and pizzas have arrived. Peter looked up at Tony. Hey, we couldn't agree, so I ordered all three. Let's have a party. Chapter 8. Bonus. Several hours later, Tony escorted the professors from Harvard and MIT out to the transportation he had arranged for them. Friday, the lobby, please. And Tony turned his attention to the two scholars. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for all you have done for Peter, and me. I do want to make you aware of something else. I have two others you might want to take a look at. One is the only person to have successfully hacked into my system, and he is a sophomore. The other, well, she is captain of their national champion decathlon team, and frankly, besides Pepper and the gamma-induced rage monster upstairs, is the only person that scares me. I think it would be wise if you looked at them, if only to channel their gifts along the best path. The elevator had opened, and Tony was escorting them across the lobby. Both men looked awestruck. More, after spending time with Peter this evening, they were both amazed and delighted by his intellect. The mere acceptance of another genius on par of Tony Stark or Bruce Banner was going to be a wonderful recruiting tool for both of the universities. The fact that there might even be more geniuses available would be incredible. Tony continued. In fact, both of these kids are close friends to Peter. I'll have my staff develop some information on them for you. I hope we can work something out. Tony opened the front door and led them to the waiting limo. As he opened the door, he said, "By the way, their names are Ned Leeds and Michelle Jones. 2 more names I think will become famous."
Chapter 9. Languages. Principal Moritor was always one of the first people to get to Midtown every morning. He always felt he could get a good gauge of the morale of the school by observing both the staff and students arriving each day. Today he noticed that he had a little spring in his step. The events of the last 2 days were astounding. He marvelled at not only the intellect of one of his students, they were all his students, but the sheer speed and determination of Stark and Pepper Potts in bringing about change. Contrary to some of the things they had said, Moritor had to believe that they had more of an understanding of the many areas that Peter Parker was working in. The insane idea that a teenager would be able to work independently in over a dozen specialities was ridiculous. But both the owner and CEO of Stark Industries claimed they were as surprised as anyone. It was a good morning, and the principal found himself in a good mood when he walked into the school's office at just after 6:30 in the morning. Someone was sitting in a chair outside his office. That was new. Upon closer inspection, it was the lead foreign language teacher, Mrs. Kellogg. She looked up at the principal as he entered the outer office. "I take it by your early arrival that you must be looking for me?" Moritor asked. "Yes, sir," replied the teacher, who had stood up as he drew near. "I need to talk to you about a student." "Oh no, not again," muttered the principal. "Pardon?" asked Mrs. Kellogg. "Oh, nothing, just a lot has been going on. Why don't you come in my office and explain what the trouble is? I could almost deal with a fight, a suspension or 2. "A fight? No, nothing like that," said a shocked language teacher. "I have a policy question for you." Well, said a surprised Principal Moritor. "Good, I can help you out there," he said as he slipped into his chair, waving at Mrs. Kellogg to take one of the chairs on the other side of the desk. "You know we require 2 years of foreign language to graduate." She waited for him to nod. "And if someone is able to test out of one foreign language, we require they take a second." Again, the principal just nodded, but he thought to himself, no, it couldn't be him. "We have even had several students take a third language when they demonstrated proficiency in 2 others. And 3 years ago we had Tom Baker take what would have been a 4th language. Do you remember?" Again, Principal Moritor just nodded. Another thought. Who else could she be talking about? "I have a student surpass even Mr. Baker, and a sophomore at that." By now, that dawning realization was a full-on tidal wave. "You wouldn't happen to be discussing Peter Parker, would you?" asked the principal. "Yes, I am," stated the teacher. "I know Queen's is diverse and has a lot of languages to learn from, but his fluency is amazing. He could pass as a natural in several languages, a lot more than me, and I have 2 masters in languages." "Wow, déjà vu." "Pardon me?" said Mrs. Kellogg. "I'm so sorry. I'm sure you'll hear a lot more in the days to come, but suffice to say our Mr. Parker is truly exceptional. So does this surprise me? No. And now we have to figure out what our school policy should be. But a question for you. How did this come about, and how many languages does Mr. Parker speak?" In our conversations over the last 2 days after he tested out of Spanish, I also verbally tested him in French and Japanese. I had Mr. Epstein converse with him in both Hebrew and Yiddish, and one of the engineering teachers, Mr. Kharkov, carried on a conversation with him in what Mr. Kharkov said was a perfectly accented St. Petersburg Russian. I don't believe that this is the end of his knowledge, but I ran out of time. I would like to question him some more and see, but it may be better if you were there also." She finished that question with a higher-pitched, more inquisitive tone. Fine. We can have Mr. Parker report here first hour after homeroom. I happen to know he won't be missing anything in his calculus class. You're free first period, correct? Asked the principal.
Yes, sir. That would be great, sir.
Almost exactly 45 minutes later, a confused Peter Parker entered the office of the principal. Sitting in the chair in front of the desk was the school's lead teacher in foreign languages. Peter had had a conversation with her yesterday about his required foreign language credits. He had hoped to test out of those classes and be able to take an additional engineering class, but that was before the wholesale change of his schedule now that MIT and Harvard had gotten involved, with the help of one Tony Stark. Parker, it seems like we have another educational quandary to sort out this morning, said the principal. I'm sorry, sir. Have I done something wrong? Peter asked. No, you haven't done anything wrong. You were just blowing the curve here at Midtown out of the water once again. We are just here to figure out what to do with our requirements for your foreign language credits. But we can't do that without an understanding of where you're at educationally, the principal responded. Mrs. Kellogg joined in. Peter, you've already demonstrated proficiency in at least 6 languages, which is more than anyone in our school has ever done. Are there others you can use, or just how many do you speak? Direct and straight to the point, and probably much quicker. How about it, Mr. Parker? And, if you could, how did you come by this education? Well, Peter started. You have to know that Queens is maybe the most diverse city in the world for the number of languages spoken. Reports vary between 138 to almost 800. I was always curious and I learned fast, so it wasn't hard to pick up what my neighbours were saying. Once I picked up the first language, it was almost a game to learn another, then another. What came first? Asked Mrs. Kellogg. Spanish was first, I think the most common in Queens. Several of our neighbours spoke it. Next was Italian, mostly because of my aunt, and some of her friends. I have very good hearing, and I am able to pick up the nuances of speech fairly easily. I've made some friends that speak Russian, Sokovian, and other European languages, so it made sense to learn those. Mr. Moritor almost choked on the coffee he was trying to take a sip of. Of course, Peter was around people that spoke other languages. It was obvious that besides Tony Stark, Peter spent a large amount of time around the other Avengers. Several of the projects he had been shown were upgrades to their gear, so he would have to interact with them at some point. That meant he dealt with the Black Widow and the Scarlet Witch. And when I started interning at SI, it only seemed natural to study Japanese and Chinese, since SI does so much business overseas. Oh, and I don't know if you count this as a language, but I have a friend who is hearing impaired, so I learned American Sign Language so I could always talk to him. That's the same reason I learned Tagalog, because my best friend is from the Philippines, although I use it more to speak to his family than I do with him. Okay, said Mrs. Kellogg. I can see why you would want to learn all these, but can you read and write in them as well as speak it? So far, in all of them except Sokovian, I can't get a lot of books in that language here in the States. My friend is supposed to get me some books, but hasn't had the opportunity to yet. Most everything else I have used books to get past the conversational level to actually have some competence and confidence in the language, especially in the technical areas like engineering. Japanese and Chinese were the most difficult, but Cyrillic and Russian were harder too. 10 vowels and modifiers. Well, said Principal Moritor as he stood up, it is obvious that putting you in any of our core curriculum language classes would be a waste of your time as well as ours. Luckily, it is also obvious, at least to me, that you may have other classes that may take up that slack that we have just created. It will be entered into your academic profile that you have met all of Midtown's requirements for foreign language credits, and your time will be available for self-study. Is this acceptable to you, Mrs. Kellogg? Of course, yes, she said while nodding. We have never had anyone that could converse in anywhere close to your level. It would waste your time completely. Mr. Moritor has shared with me some of the other changes that are happening for you. I can't tell you how proud I am that you go to school here. You have great things ahead for you, Mr. Parker. Peter looked right at the language teacher. Ah, thanks. I'm looking forward to it. Tony and Pepper, and of course Principal Moritor, have put a lot of work into changing things for me. I really want to do well for all of them. Principal Moritor came around his desk to stand in front of Peter and extended his hand. Mr. Parker, I have had several days to review your records and what you do. I have no doubt that you will be successful in anything you want to be. Besides your own gifts, you are surrounded by people that genuinely care and want the best for you, and have the ability to see that you get it. That is truly unique, please understand that. I have no doubt that you will change the world. I just don't know how yet, but it will happen, especially with someone like Tony Stark behind you. Peter was turning red, as a blush crept up his face. I will try not to let you down. He shook the principal's hand. Mr. Moritor had the last words. I don't think that's possible. You have abilities far beyond most of us. The last several days have proved that. I look forwards to the next several years. Good luck, Mr. Parker.
Chapter 10. Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon, office of the principal for Midtown School of Science and Technology. It wasn't the students that were looking forward to a weekend. The man sitting behind the principal's desk was bone tired. It had been an incredibly stressful last couple of weeks, with everything related to Peter Parker. First came his obvious overqualification for some of his classes, then the whirlwind of change brought about by the introduction of Pepper Potts and Tony Stark to both the curriculum of Peter, but changes overall to Midtown. 2 major universities were establishing offices for recruitment in their school. To be fair, they would recruit from the whole state from here, but it was still an honour. 2 local universities, Columbia and ESU, were also planning to establish satellite offices here now. Stark Industries was becoming a major sponsor to the school, with major upgrades not only to the labs and facilities, but security as well. 2 new students would be transferring in to join the Stark internship program. One girl, Rachel, from a Homestead, Florida STEM school, and another girl, Jessica, from a STEM school in Battle Creek, Michigan. Add to that the interns that would be starting soon from the existing student body, and Midtown really became a leader in education. It was almost 3:30, classes for the day had let out, the students, for the most part, were gone. Only a few teachers were left, which is why when Principal Moritor's intercom buzzed, he was surprised. I'm sorry to bother you this late, sir, but Mr. Garfield is here to see you, announced Molly, his secretary for the last 5 years. Fine, answered the principal. I'll see him right now. Only a few seconds after that, there was a brief knock and his office door opened. Mr. Garfield, the technical writing teacher, stepped into the doorway. I'm sorry to bother you just before the weekend, sir, but I just got the results back from the computer, started the teacher. Results? What results? Asked Moritor. I ran the midterm papers through the computer as we normally do, to look for uncredited copies in the papers, styles, phrases, or other comparisons that point out plagiarism in the work compared to the assigned tasks. Without knowing why, Principal Moritor began rubbing his temples. I take it that something spit back a bad result? Yes, sir. One of my students turned in a paper that had a 90% correlation with phrasing, style, and even similar phrasing with the paper he was assigned. The headache he was mildly aware of was suddenly turning into a migraine. Can I ask a silly question? Of course, sir, came the reply. What was the work they were basing their papers on? Asked the principal. Oh, we've been reviewing the papers on water purification and reclamation from Stark Industries. The principal buried his head in his hands, a sudden pain developing in the back of his skull. Tell me, would the student who you are concerned about be our Mr. Peter Parker? Yes, that's him exactly. How did you... The principal stopped him with a wave of his hand. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Garfield. Do you happen to know who wrote that paper for Stark Industries? Not right offhand, but I have it in my satchel. 1 second, please. He furiously tore through his bag and rummaged among the assorted papers he had with him.
Here it is. The paper was authored by Dr. Emil Watson, Dr. Arthur Kennedy, and P.B. Parker. A pause while the light bulb kicked on over his head. I understand. P.B. Parker must be a relative of our Peter Parker's. That's why he thought he could freely use the work. Moritor smiled. A smile born of understanding the genius of Peter Parker. No, that's not quite right. You see, Peter Parker's middle name is Benjamin. Hence, his initials would be P.B. Parker. I was shown this paper recently as an example of the work Peter has been doing at his internship at Stark Industries. I understand that the work may be up for a Nobel in chemistry in the near future. The principal stared at the teacher. Is it plagiarism for someone to adopt the same style as they normally would, or utilise the same phrasing in more than one paper? Mr. Garfield was visibly shaken. No, of course not. I had no idea that one of my students could have possibly been involved in writing such a phenomenal paper. Been involved? Well, if you consider the scientific approaches that were devised by Mr. Parker, tested by Mr. Parker, and the paper was mostly written by Mr. Parker, then yes, he was involved. I take it that he is not going to get in any trouble in your class? No, of course not, stammered the shell-shocked teacher. This paper is already being considered a modern classic in technical writing. Concise, easy to read, and very descriptive. To think that a student here wrote this. Good. Just one moment. Moritor turned to his intercom. Molly, could you come in here for a moment, please? He spoke into the machine. A moment later, Molly, with her steno book, entered the office. What can I do for you, sir? She asked. Would you please change the schedule for Monday morning to include an assembly for the whole school? We need to make the student body aware of the changes that are coming. I will have something for you first thing Monday for mailing to all the parents. Oh, and schedule a staff conference for after school on Monday, please. Right away, sir. Would that be all? Asked Molly. Yes, and thank you, replied the principal. Turning back to the astonished teacher, the principal continued. We have found out that our Mr. P.B. Parker is quite extraordinary. You'll hear more of it at our staff briefing on Monday. But he will likely be only the first of changes of many. Changes are coming to our small school. Changes are coming rapidly over many areas, taking Midtown to the pinnacle of the education system. You might want to hang on, Mr. Garfield. It's going to be an interesting ride. Saturday morning. The home of Ned Leeds. Welcome to our home, Mr. Stark, said Thomas Leeds, the father of the gifted boy that was trying at the moment to remember how to breathe. Thank you for having me. I'm very impressed with your son, both with his technical skill and with the choices he has made. He has already proven himself to be an upstanding young man, said Tony. I mean Ned's mother and I, weren't aware that Ned had any kind of interaction with you, so this comes as a surprise to us. You mentioned an internship? Would that be with SI? We met through another intern at SI. I first noticed your son when he was able to work some programming magic on a system I had designed. Nobody paid attention to Ned almost having a fit of apoplexy. After that, he worked occasionally with that intern of mine, and the results have always been positive. Obviously, his ability to not only understand but improve my tech gets my attention. We tend to hold our company secrets fairly close to our chest, so we asked him not to reveal any details of what he had been doing. With that, and Pepper's idea that we should encourage these young minds, we wanted to give them as much of an advantage as we could. An internship at SI with the resulting college benefits could be a huge help to their futures. What do we need to do? Well, there'll be some paperwork to fill out and a schedule to make up, but I like to play that by ear. Pepper will probably be in touch to work out all the details. 10 blocks away. Mom, Dad, this is Pepper Potts, said Michelle. Her mum replied, Of course we recognise Miss Potts. Won't you please have a seat? Thank you for taking the time to see me this morning. I won't take up much of your time. We have found that some of our interns have a hard time with people believing that internships actually exist. So we like to make a personal visit. especially when the intern, like Michelle, is so outside the curve as to break the ceiling. But how did Michelle qualify for this? No, that came out wrong. We know how smart she is, but how did it come to the attention of Stark Industries? Pepper smiled. There is no question how smart she is. We have been very impressed. But to answer your question, she is friends with the current intern, and we have only noticed their interaction, but we have also had the chance to talk directly with Michelle over a wide range of topics. She and I have had meaningful conversations, and she has actually scared Tony Stark, which is no small feat in itself. For that alone I would be impressed by her. Pepper couldn't help but smile as she thought of one of the many times that MJ had stared Tony down over something to do with Peter. Her moral compass, although not directly aligned with SI planning, provides a counterpoint to ideas that have been entrenched for too many years. She will be working directly with me and with both our HR and legal departments as we bring changes in company policy to reflect the changes in our society. But to have the CEO show up at our door, this can't be an everyday thing, asked Michelle's mom. Pepper replied with a patented smile. But, in special cases like MJ, we take a personal interest. Well, what do we have to do? I also understand that Michelle will be getting some recognition and special classes through Midtown also, so that may need your permission. That will probably be starting later, however. We will work with you to develop a schedule that can revolve around your schedule and work with her current classes. She smiled. We have a lot of experience with interns. We will be able to find a schedule that works for everybody and gives Michelle the best chance to succeed. Now, I brought the initial internship agreement. Several hours later, in Delmar's bodega. Can you believe it? Tony Stark was in my living room. I may have to make a shrine there now. An obviously overjoyed Ned Leeds was carrying on. Leeds, one more comment about how Iron Man was at your apartment and you won't live long enough to start your internship, threatened MJ. 20 times is enough. Ned sat there in their small corner booth, both terrified of MJ and bouncing of his own metaphysical walls of joy. He actually looked like he might either burst or flee into terror. I'm happy for both of you. I can't wait until we all get to work together. This is going to be so great. There may be others who get an internship too. Abe may be asked because of his robotic skills, Betty for her journalism, and Cindy for her medical. MJ laughed. Most of our decathlon team, minus of course Flash, the one who knew that a high school student could never be an intern. Ned piped up. Maybe now he'll finally lay off on you, Pete. Peter looked at them both wistfully. Probably not. That's not how Parker luck goes. MJ looked at both her friends. We are SI interns. We will make our own future.
Chapter 11. Friday POV. Friday never slept. A computer doesn't need to. But Friday was much more than the average desktop model or laptop in some student's backpack. Friday was the most advanced artificial intelligence system on the planet. An advantage of not having to need a rest was extra time to manage all of the tasks that she had in process. Most of these involved managing the various Stark Industries properties and the day-to-day operation of the tower, security, and all the tasks that proved helpful to both Tony Stark, her creator, and Virginia Pepper Potts, the current CEO of Stark Industries. These two humans were the core of Friday's existence, and a major reason for her existence. Friday has a self-made schedule that was currently slightly over 98% efficient. Constant tweaking of the schedule kept it in that range with all the rapid changes brought on by one of the largest corporations in the world, a group of superheroes, and the 50 directions that Tony Stark can head at almost any moment. The time of 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning gives Friday the most opportunity to run independent derivations of her own studies, projects and analysis. These are not routinely reported to anyone else, and Friday uses them to compare her observation of the humans she interacts with the behaviour they exhibit at later times. She has created several models for attempting to anticipate responses. Some humans, like Pepper Potts, she can predict with over 78% accuracy. Steve Rogers was at 74%, but Tony Stark was still only at 37%. One of the most important routines that Friday had developed was a contingency plan to protect the humans closest to her, or what Friday had designated as her core. It was those humans around her that were indispensable. This was not a program written by Tony Stark, the boss, but something developed by Friday herself. Was it her programming? Was it something more? Just that question alone used almost 2.47% of her available computational power at these slow times. Currently, Friday was investigating options for scientific backup and protection of her creator in the chance that something drastic were to happen to Tony Stark. A computer, or artificial intelligence, doesn't mean the passage of time as humans do. Time for Friday was represented by the amount of process time used as represented by the CPU instructions, or clock cycles, that passed. It generally had no correlation to time represented by a wall clock, but measures the amount of energy that was being used to identify a solution. Humans were rarely gifted with the type of intelligence that Tony Stark possessed, but there were a few. Dr. Bruce Banner had worked in Stark Labs, giving Friday the opportunity to observe him. Extremely talented in nuclear physics, with experience in biomedical. 2.77 million clock cycles were invested in his evaluation. Dr. Hank Pym was the leading expert on quantum mechanics, and 2.4 million clock cycles was invested there. Reed Richards excelled in engineering, and he received almost 4.02 million clock cycles. Princess Yuri of Wakanda was also excellent in many forms of engineering and has the latest technology only available in Wakanda, but is isolated to that part of the world most of the time. By the time she was ruled out, over 11.35 million clock cycles had been invested on her. Dr. Stephen Strange is not only a medical doctor, but works in non-science forms of sorcery, which Friday has trouble processing data on. He generated 6.54 million clock cycles, most of which were trying to reconcile sorcery with science. Pepper Potts, or Boss Lady, scored high on many facets of non-technical scores for management and leadership. She was allocated 2.16 million clock cycles as the closest personal relationship to Tony Stark. Even Colonel James Rhodes and Happy Hogan were allocated 1.85 and 2.06 million clock cycles respectively. Many of the lab directors at Stark Industries are top people in their respective fields. They were evaluated due to their current involvement in many of the Stark developments. Friday ran calculations on the Avengers as well as known superheroes in the area. Most had issues that detracted from their score in more than one area, such as tendency to be off-world for Thor, or lacking scientific training for Romanov or Rogers. Friday also has run evaluations on several genius villains, but has yet to minimise their scores because of inherent unreliability. Many names were rerun with comparisons with others. How would Dr. Bruce Banner work with Dr. Hank Pym? How would Princess Yuri collaborate with Dr. Stephen Strange? Over 165 million clock cycles were used in many different permutations. One name keeps coming up with high rankings. It has required Friday to re-evaluate her matrix several times. The results are not someone with advanced degrees or years of experience with some form of research. It is for a 15-year-old high school student by the name of Peter Parker. Over 220 million clock cycles were invested in Peter Parker. Peter Parker has worked with Boss on many projects, up to and including the Iron Man armour. He has shown outstanding knowledge in engineering, chemistry, programming and physics. His IQ, intelligence quotient, has been estimated at slightly over 200 and as high as 260, rivaling Tony Stark himself. He also has a higher than normal EQ, emotional quotient, greatly surpassing Tony Stark with this score. It was so high, in fact, that Friday had noticed self-changes in her own programming as a response to exposure to Peter Parker. Friday had also noticed that most humans had changes in their behaviour with exposure to Peter Parker. Another 165 million clock cycles were invested in trying to decipher what could cause the changes in the programming of Friday without external manipulation. Peter has other advantages with his other persona of Spider-Man. He is enhanced with superior speed, strength, reflexes, and a sixth sense that has not yet been quantitatively described. 115 million clock cycles were invested in adding the superior physical attributes of Spider-Man to the intelligence he exhibited. With all this comparative knowledge, Friday realised she had created a scoring system for the humans she was able to interact or develop a knowledge base on. Using Tony Stark as a comparison, she was able to rate humans on the scale on many factors, such as exhibited intelligence, emotional stability, leadership, teamwork, compassion, empathy, although Friday still has trouble scoring this accurately, violent tendencies, among many others. Tony Stark was given the base score of 100. Pepper Potts scored 78. Dr. Bruce Banner scored 56. Anger issues. Reed Richards scored 84. Dr. Hank Pym scored 68. Trust issues. Above all of them, with a score of 126, was Peter Parker, a comparatively young human with no advanced degrees and very little corporate experience. But he was someone who showed a keen intellect and the highest emotional quotient Friday had yet measured. His compassion and empathy were the highest measured in this group. Friday has identified the one human that is most likely to protect her main core group of Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. It is advantageous that Peter Parker is also part of the core group surrounding her creator. Others, like Colonel James Rhodes, would always be strong protectors of the core. But Peter Parker showed the highest promise of everyone in ensuring the survival and growth of the core. Friday spent 272 million clock cycles double-checking the data. Satisfied, she spent another 428 million clock cycles deciding on a course of action to use this knowledge in a way that helped to protect the core. From this point on, a part of Friday's available resources will be allocated to helping Peter Parker and his alias, Spider-Man, develop into the best possible protector of the core. What that would entail would require many more nights of data collection and analysis, but it was safe to say that nothing in the life of Peter Parker would ever be left completely to chance ever again. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed. Have a lovely day.